Are these really worth upgrading? Guess we're going to find out. Let's just have a quick gander at Shay's truck. I'll do a quick run over on it and we shall see. All right, engine is, all intents and purposes, now is a intercooled VE engine. Now it is completely rebuilt. So HX35, which this one is off of a newer, like a, let's say a 2001 standard truck. So it does have an 8-blade compressor wheel in it. They honestly, I don't think they make that much difference, but we will test that at some point as well. So VE pump is a stock VE pump with unknown amount of kilometers on it. It does have a govern spring in it and a little bit extra fuel on the fuel pin, or not the fuel pin, sorry, the fuel screw. But other than all intents and purposes, the rest of it is stock. We have jumped the timing 1 tooth, and then I pulled the pump back to stock, so it's going to be a little higher than stock per se, but this just gives you a general idea. I'm just telling you what we have going on. Fuel injectors are stock flow, but my new style injectors that I will be selling, pre-selling, sooner than later here. As soon as we get some of these dyno videos, I'll talk about that in a separate video. Sorry for the noise, that heater's going on. It's snowing outside here. So we do have a second gen intercooler. There's nothing special about it. It's just a used second engine intercooler with 3-inch boost tubes on it. We've already checked, make sure no boost leaks. The wastegate is set factory setup as far as that goes. I'll be honest with you guys, I don't have gauges in this thing yet. So we don't know what the temperatures are, but we're just looking for a horsepower number. When we get into the tuning side, I'll have the gauges installed and I'll actually be able to show you some boost numbers and all that type of stuff. Thing up, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do 2 hits, get the engine all warmed up. I wanna heat soak it so that we know that all these runs are done at the same. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wait until, so it's gonna take me a few hours to do these. I am gonna wait until our oil temperature is the same on every one of them, or relatively the same. And we'll just do over and over and over again. So we'll be doing, I don't know if I'm gonna do, well, I don't know, we'll see. I was thinking of doing 2 runs per position of fuel pin, and then obviously I'll put the other fuel pin in. We'll do 2 runs on that, and we'll see what we get for numbers, and I'll come back to you guys. But I'll show you the dyno runs, just like I have been trying to do with the dyno stuff. So let's get into it. Low fuel, oil temp, 145. Got those 2 tests done. We're making power between 27 and 2800 RPM, just like peak power, which is about kind of what I figured, being that it's a stock pump. And I am loading it a little heavier in the run, but I figured as long as we do all the runs at the same load and all that stuff, because you can load it heavier, and I think I might be loading it a little too heavy because it doesn't want to come up through the whole RPM range. Either that or there's not enough fuel to drive it past the load, which is fine for what we're, all intents and purposes of what we're doing, because you're not, like with that much fuel, you're not driving it that hard. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna pull this back off and I'm gonna rotate the pin 90 degrees from where it is. Actually, maybe, well, I'll show you when I pull the pin right out, but I'm just gonna rotate it 90 degrees from where it is, which is gonna give us mid-range fuel on the stock fuel pin, and then we'll do a couple more runs, and then we'll do that all the way. And I'm gonna do the aftermarket pin at the very end. So whatever we get for power numbers, the engine is gonna be as heat soaked within reason as it's gonna be. And the reason I like doing it that way is that nobody can say, oh, well, you did that run first, so that's why it made more power. We're doing the low power runs first. And I did originally start the run at 145 degrees oil temp. But I had to do 2 runs to get the dyno set up. So we ended up, it seemed to equalize out about 150, 154. So I'm just going to use 154 as long as the engine block is this roughly the same temperature. And we'll do that, just try to keep it as normal as possible. I don't know, it does actually show, I think, temperature-wise, but it's not really cold outside. But I do have the door, it's got a little bit smoky in here, so I opened up the door a little while ago. I should maybe shut the heat. No, I'll leave the heater on, try to keep the temperature normalized in here best we can, because it's, yeah, I don't want it to change too much. So let's swap that pin around. I do want to maybe say too, you guys can't see my face at the moment, is that HX35 that's on this thing is not happy with life. So, I don't know, it was just one I had laying around. I don't know what the deal is with it, but it does have a little tight spot in it. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it scattergascars at some point through these tests. But hopefully it'll last, because I, at the moment, don't have a different one to use. Well, I do. I guess I shouldn't say that. I do. I just don't want to rip it off a complete engine. But it's still good for now. So we got that turned into our midpoint now. We'll do, I'm going to fire it up, let it cool off a little bit, and then I'll be back with you guys. Mid-fuel position. That's what temperature the oil is. Off the oil filter right now. We'll do 2 pulls. See what we get. All right, so I got it switched over to the max amount of fuel that the stock fuel pin will put out. So we are going to do some runs. 2 or 3 or whatever. The last one I did 2. We'll talk about all the horsepower numbers and stuff when we get done everything here to keep you guys in suspense. So let's put. So the fuel pin we're going to use is actually the one that was in there. It's actually still kind of scuzzy, but this is just a generic one. I honestly don't even know where it came from. It looks like it's been around for a while. I think it was used when we put it in there. It's got a little wear mark in it. Whatever, not going to hurt nothing for what this thing is doing. But this is, there is other fuel pins, obviously. Like I said, this is just a generic one. There's no markings or anything on it. I don't know where it came from, but we're going to put that in there and see what we get out of it. Now, one thing that you do want to pay attention to is that when you buy one of these, you need to make sure it's hard. Like if you buy a really cheap one, they make them out of crappy material. And what happens is we'll see how this has a little wear mark in it, so it's not near as hard as the factory one is. So I'll pull that one out and I'll show you what I mean. If you look at this fuel pin, look at that fuel pin, you can see that there's no, like there's a little tiny line right there where it looks like somebody's been running it for a while. There's not a lot, and this is the original pin that used to be in this thing. Where they were running it about, for the most part, it looks like for years they ran it in the mid-fuel range, according to my marks. So, let's pull this thing off. If you guys have never done this, if you take this off, we'll have a tamper-proof screw usually if it's never been off, so you have to screw around with that. And then it'll just have like slot standard style screws in it. I always replace them just with hex or Allen key or whatever, cap head screws. If you want to change this, if you're changing this, one, like I said, you can rotate. And if you look at that, if you don't know, basically like this is the lowest fuel amount and this is the highest fuel amount. And then obviously mid-range. So if you want to just get the most out of it without spending any money, what you can do is just turn it so that this is the best range in there. You know, like years ago, yes, I have ground these. I had one break once. After that, I never ground one. So I honestly don't recommend grinding them. But do as you may. If you would like to grind, you can put a profile, something like this on it, or you can just go buy this. Honestly, if you're going to do anything, I personally would buy an RPM spring. That's actually something else I don't know on this. I'm assuming they were not running out of fuel, but that is also possible. But I guess for this test, I don't think that we're going to run out of fuel with a big bore lift pump. I don't think we're going to run out of fuel. So, and just two 10 mil wrenches if you want to take this off if you've never done one. There's a flat set of flat spots in here. It does have a little wavy washer. You want to put that back in. Take the old fin, just put that in my pocket so I don't lose it. And what we're going to do here is I'm just going to put this marking, so let me know where max is, just so I know where to put it in when I put it in. And this is going to go, your pin comes out of the pump this way, so you want your, whatever spot you want on your pin, you want it to be facing forwards on the engine, or to the front of the truck. You guys let me know what you think we're going to gain on this. I'm curious. I'm curious what we're going to gain on this. You guys let me know in the comments what you think we're going to gain, and I'm going to do that right now. Pause the video, do that right now. Or aftermarket fuel pin. We're going to do a couple runs at that, see what it got. The oil temperature is, hold on, let me start the truck and just double check. Turn my fan on. Be right back. 150 Fahrenheit. Alright guys, we got done the dyno runs on the truck doing the fuel pin stuff, and it was basically what I figured was going to happen. Now, I will give a disclaimer here, is not every pump is the same, not every injector is the same, not every engine is the same. So this may vary a little bit, and also take into consideration I'm at like 3,200 feet. So the DA is pretty good today, but about 3,200 feet. Of elevation. So at lower elevation, you're going to make more power. So, and also too, there's other little variables that go, like the fuel. It has winter fuel in it. So the winter fuel is not as good as summer fuel, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, so let's look at some dyno graphs. Now, I tried to start all of the runs at 1,400 RPM, best that I could. And I would say I was pretty close to where I was starting. I was trying to start every one of them at 1,400. So this is the first one, which is at the lowest point in the scenario. And actually, to be totally honest with you, all these numbers actually, I thought were pretty good. Now, like I said, the fuel injectors that are in this thing, the pump is turned up a little bit fuel screw wise. We'll get into that in another video, but it has good fuel pressure. It holds at like 10 pounds at every RPM. It's building about 25 pounds of boost under full load, so not crazy. But it does have a factory flowing nozzle, but just a better optimized nozzle. So a stock 6x10 or 6x9.5 or whatever they are, but a stock nozzle for that may not make as much power as this does, just because the efficiency of the injector isn't quite as good. So I just thought I would mention that, but this will give you a general idea. So our lowest point on the pin, you are you can actually see here. So the two runs that I did, I figured I'd do 2 runs on each one. You can see it did make peak power a little bit higher, 100 RPM higher, which could have been, and that's why it made a touch more horsepower. It could have been that I started the run just a little bit higher. Like I said, it's hard to start the run in the same spot every time. I'm going to monkey around a little bit and just see. I think I'm going to start doing some of these tests in a different setting on the dyno. I think what I might do is just set them, do a step test, maybe. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But I'll probably actually redo these. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what I had going on. Anyway, so the lowest point on the pin, you're 200 and let's say 225 horsepower, which is pretty good in my opinion, being these things were only supposed to be 160 horse at the flywheel stock, which we all know was incorrect. Now in the midpoint, we gained like 20 horsepower, right? Yeah, about 20 horsepower, which is a pretty good, 20 horsepower by just moving the pin. You just want a little bit more out of it. Doesn't cost nothing to do that. Now, going from that, moving to the next one, we made like another 10 horsepower-ish. Another 10 horsepower. There again, pretty good. And the maps, like the overlay on the maps are almost perfect. Or the graphs, I should say. So, like it was making power roughly the same. And obviously, no. It's funny because the heat soak didn't really, like, these runs were not timed much differently. It doesn't tell me the time there, but the time doesn't tell us much different. And then the torque is all pretty good. It's in the, well, you're 460 on that one, but you're 500, 520 on the next one up. Now, this is the aftermarket fuel pin. Now, like I said, there is more than one design. This is just the one that I had laying around. And we honestly, if you had to buy one of those pins, from 220 or 255 horsepower. Now, granted, it did make power a little bit lower in RPM. So power come on a little bit faster. So, but not much. Like you're talking, well, the highest one was 2,700 RPM, 2,600 RPM, 2,600 RPM, and this one was 2,550. So the power come on a little bit quicker, if you put the overlay on it. But it basically very, very similar as far as that goes. And the shape of the dyno of the graphs are almost identical. This one's maybe a little steeper versus versus this one here, or even this one for that matter. But goes to show you, if you're putting a fuel pin in one of these things, you're not gaining an astronomical amount of power from that pin, at the very least in stock form. Not adding a bigger injector or anything like that. When we get into doing that, we'll try this test over again and see what we get, because I'm actually curious. But I do need to get, I have the boost gauge just kind of rigged in there right now, but I want a dry pressure gauge, and I also want pyro in there, and then the proper boost gauge, so that I can actually show you guys some stuff, because that is definitely, this, I wasn't worried about the EGTs just because it's not making enough power for the short runs that I'm doing. I wasn't worried about it, but this is something that I wanted to get the engine broke in and all that type of stuff. So these runs are good to help the engine break in. And some of this will probably normalize out a bit too after the engine gets broken. But nonetheless, I think it was a good test. So like if you're, don't want to spend a bunch of money, myself personally, you want to make sure you have a good lift pump. Now, also, to remember, the timing is turned up in this. So just take that into consideration. The timing is turned up in this. So it would be, it's skipped one tooth, but then pulled back basically to where a stock timing would be. So it's basically, let's say, 4 degrees higher than it would normally be, 4 or 5 degrees. I should actually figure out how many degrees it is per tooth. But anyways, doesn't matter. But that's roughly how it is. Oh, actually, you know what? I could actually tell you exactly how much timing it is. We'll do that in the video, because that would actually be good. Would be good knowledge. Yeah, we'll do that. There's a way to do that. So hopefully this helps you guys. If you're doing this, if you have one of these trucks, not trying to make a bunch of power with it, myself personally, make sure you have a good lift. Make sure you had good lift pump. Have a govern spring in it, a 3,200 RPM govern spring or above. Like you could do a 3,600, 3,800. Sorry, 3,800. I probably would do a 3,800 if you have valve springs, honestly. That's something we'll talk to Evan about too when we do the podcast with him. Yeah. But I would do, at the very least, do a 3,200, do a 3,800 as long as you have valve springs to do the 3,800. And then, just turn your fuel pin, realistically, you're only making like a couple horsepower more, according to this. Now, like I said, that's not all fuel pins. I know that Denny T has a few different ones, and I honestly don't know on those ones. I've had bigger pumps and all that type of stuff, but a bigger pump is going to move more fuel, so it makes more power. The fuel pin affects it, but it affects it differently. And then having bigger injector obviously is going to affect it different too. So Hopefully this helps some guys out. Don't waste a bunch of money, especially if you're not trying to make a bunch more power. Like I said, timing, govern spring, a decent valve spring, and it's a little bit of pump tuning, and you're 250 horsepower. All right, watch this next video. It'll help you out immensely.